those of us who love acting, film, were affected. A lot of us were. When we lost Gene Hackman, 95 years old. 95. He was very talented. A different kind of actor. He wasn't your leading man type. He led movies, but he thought of himself as a character actor. Just an actor. He took his work very seriously. And in the next hour, or less or more, I'm going to talk about the man, his work, what made him tick. We're going to touch on his death and just pay tribute in the actor's room to Eugene Allen Hackman. I almost said Ackman. To Eugene Allen Hackman, born on January 30th, 1930. He did a lot for actors, actresses, directors, writers, and the like. So sit back, relax, grab a beverage of choice. It's the Actors Room, episode 140. I hope you enjoy the show. I want to start off the show by saying hello. It's been a while, and thank you for joining me in this episode of The Actors Room. I'm a little nervous because it has been a while, so bear with me. I want to give Gene Hackman a bit of a tribute because he deserves it. He was one of the great ones, and I throw that term around every now and then on my show, and they're great and amazing, and look at their work. It's mind-blowing. And all the other shows I've done is true. I only highlight ones that move me and have moved others. Gene is one of them, but he's in a special category with some of the special artists that I highlight. And he's one of them. I believe that. Maybe it's because he was doing it back in the day when it was something maybe a little new. He was in New York for a while, and then he went to California and tried that, and then he went back to New York, and he struggled, and he got through it, and he loved it. He loved the struggle. Everything about being an actor was appealing to him in some way or another, whether it was positive or negative. He sort of enjoyed the whole process. A true artist in every sense of the word, and he never gave up. You can't. And one of the things that appealed to me about Gene Hackman was he was natural. You could tell he had it, and some don't. Most don't. That special spark made him special. And it took a little while to break through, but he had that natural thing about him. You believed him. It came through. We respected his work. We liked him, yes, loved him, and respected him. The respect factor is something that is sort of being lost in today's art. But back then, it meant something. And it was deep-rooted in just the love of acting. And Gene Hackman loved acting. Art. And that's what the Actors Room is all about. That's why I started the show. And we will continue on with the show and talking about an artist like Gene Hackman. It's fun. It's refreshing. And I hope that my audience learned something new about Gene Hackman you may have never known about, or you just want to rehash certain things and reminisce in his work and get another person's perspective on what Gene Hackman meant to someone else like me. Someone who did act in time, long time ago, and may know a little bit about it, even though it was a long time ago. But I study film, I study directors and writers, and I try to delve into the outside stuff that these actors do. Not today. I really don't do that anymore. But I used to. I used to read all the magazines and all the gossip stuff and watch all the Access Hollywood shows. And Gene Hackman wasn't a part of that game. He didn't want to play that game. Very private. Hardly did interviews. But when he did do interviews, they were fascinating to watch and to listen to him because he didn't do it all the time. He would do the press junkets and all that, promoting a film. But it was very rare for Gene Hackman to sit down for a half hour or so and talk about his life. He didn't want to open that box. And if he did, that was interesting. So, let's start from the beginning. Somewhere I always like to start. Why not? Makes sense. Talk about their childhood a bit. Talk about how they got into acting. What influenced them? Who influenced them? What was that little spark inside when they were younger? Or maybe it wasn't that young. Maybe they were in their 20s when it happened. But for Gene, it happened pretty early on. Just watching film. The one actor that really stood out to him, that influenced him the most, was James Cagney. And James Cagney comes up a lot in these older actors and who influenced them. It makes sense. I haven't watched a lot of Cagney films because they were older films, 20s, 30s, 40s. I don't watch a lot of older films. I just don't. I should. And I do aim to watch more Jimmy Cagney films. It seems to me that Mr. Cagney can do it all. His spectrum, okay, there were no limits for Mr. Cagney. Dramatic, comedy, singing, dancing. For a young budding artist, someone can look at James Cagney and go, wow, I want to do that. It influences me to want to see what that's all about, to have fun. Isn't that what it's all about? Having fun, finding out something new about yourself in the process. We will touch lightly on the early life of Mr. Hackman. Born in 1930, California. When he's 3, family moves out to Danville, Illinois. When Gene is 13, parents get divorced. This is big. Like I said, not a lot of information. But one of the things I found out was the leaving of his dad. This affected him deeply, greatly. He had the family together, although they're probably not getting along. But it's still a family unit. That breaks up here when Gene's 13, a very sensitive age. Although I think any age for a child is sensitive when their parents split. And one of the things Gene remembers when this happened is the day his dad left. Gene is playing in the street with a couple of buddies. Stickball, whatever. And his dad is leaving in his car, passes Gene on the street, and gives him a little wave goodbye. Now, at the time, I don't think Gene knew that that was the moment his dad was leaving the family. But looking back, that was the goodbye his dad gave him. Really? Ouch, ouch, ouch. And Gene brought this up in an interview. And you could tell he was very emotional, something he doesn't like to talk about. But he opened up in this interview, revealing this and how his dad left. He said that's what makes actors great. Moments like that. You can tap into them. Because that moment is locked away in Gene. And he's got the key to unlock it when he needs to in his acting. Actors are sensitive. Okay, let's put it this way. Let me take that back. I'm not saying all actors are sensitive. Most are, I think. But it helps to be sensitive as an actor. Or how to find it when you need it. I mean, being emotional on stage or in front of a camera is hard. But Gene was able to do that, bring that out, Remember that moment, a very personal one, and talk about it with others when needed to bring out emotion in him, to make him the great actor we loved. And it's because of childhood memories, ones that you might have locked away long ago, that sometimes come to the surface when we least expect it. How many times have you passed by someone and got a smell of their cologne or perfume and it sparks a memory? Or you're walking down the street and something you see reminds you of something else they haven't thought about in years. A name, a face, a moment, a feeling. A good one or a bad one. Doesn't matter, but they're there. They'll always be there. As an actor, you got to use it. That's your palette. Your emotions, your memories and feelings can be used from time to time. Gene was able to delve into that when needed. So what I get from this, the childhood thing with Gene, is it wasn't a bad childhood. Okay? I think it was just sort of, unfulfilling. And the one thing that Gene felt fulfilled in his childhood was going to the movies with his mom. They shared that interest, film, watching James Cagney, being inspired by it, making him feel good. That's something that makes me feel good. So, continuing on with feeling good, that's something I may want to look into, something I may want to do for the rest of my life. I'm afraid, it scares me, but maybe I could do that. He kept that inside. Mind you, Gene never did any school plays. And because the family moved around a lot, he had to adjust. Adjusting was big with Gene. He had to do it, or he would fail. And in his experience in school, he found himself having to make new friends constantly, or not. Knowing that he would be moving soon, why make new friends? Because I'd have the pain of losing them. The instability was big with Gene and influenced him to get out as soon as possible. When he turned 16, he notified his parents that he was either going to leave and they would never see him again because he didn't know where he was going to go, or sign papers for me to join the Marines. 16 years old. He faked documents to get into the Marines. He says that his first year in the Marine Corps was the beginning of his junior year for everybody else in his class. I think of my junior year and being in the Marines at the age of 16. That would scare the shit out of me, but not Gene. He needed to get the fuck out, and joining the Marine Corps was his way out. He was in the Marines for 4.5 years. So from the age of 16 to what is that, almost 21, these are very formidable years. They were shaped in the Marine Corps, and I think that is also significant in how he worked on set or on stage in a production, was formed in his early life. It had to have been important, and it is. And we're going to dive into that when we talk about his films, how he was on set, good and bad. Gene Hackman wasn't perfect, folks. I know we have these things. When someone dies, they're perfect. No, he wasn't perfect. Nobody is. He was great at what he did because he had a certain way of doing things. Didn't stray from it, worked for him, and he used it. The good and the bad. So let's talk more about the young life of Gene Hackman. 4.5 years as a radio operator. Is that what he was? Yes, a field radio operator for the Marines, 4.5 years. Going from here to there. I think he was stationed in California one time, China. When you're in the armed forces, they move you from here to there. So he got a taste of different cultures. Also helps as an actor. So yeah, he's growing, learning, changing. Important. Finding out about himself. Also very important. not being sheltered anymore, that sort of thing. Spreading his wings and maybe gaining more confidence as a person. When his military service was done, he moved to New York City. Wasn't confident enough yet to be an actor. So he worked odd jobs. I think he studied a little bit, not much. And then he decided to go to college. He studied journalism and television production at the University of Illinois. Didn't last long there. College thing. Not for Gene. And then with my research, it tells me that it was around 1956 he moved out to California. Was in New York for a little while. He decided to move out to California, pursue acting for real at the Pasadena Playhouse. You have to audition to get in. He did audition, got in. 1956. Met a very promising young actor there. Dustin Hoffman. Dusty Hoffman, he called him. Those two guys became friends. What do you know? The odds. Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman knew each other before they were famous. It's true, though. And they were both, nominated or termed the least likely to succeed. Goes to show you. I bet you this. The Pasadena Playhouse had all sorts of people there. Beautiful people mostly. The bright, shiny trophies that looked good, but really didn't have that much talent. Where you had Gene Hackman and Dusty Hoffman, right? Not the best looking young men, but, good enough looking to get by. But had this promise. Gene was deeply affected by the discouragement of not only his fellow classmates, his fellow students, the ones struggling to find themselves on stage, but the teachers too. Teachers told people like Dustin Hoffman and Eugene Hackman that the chances of them making it were definitely lower than everybody else. Well, show them, right, Dustin? Right, Gene? And from what my research tells me, Dustin Hoffman got asked back at the Pasadena Playhouse for second year. Gene Hackman didn't. I hear you, Gene. I didn't get back into the second year at the Playhouse either. Because I didn't kiss ass. That's what Gene said. He said Dustin Hoffman kissed ass. You got to do that to make the second year and a lot of stuff. Teacher's pet, that sort of thing. It's reality. That's just the way it is. Getting close to teachers and doing little extra things for them. I take that back. I don't. I do. I take it back. I'm sure Dustin Hoffman just, got in for his pure talent, which was very evident back then, I'm sure. I want to make this point, though. And I'm being serious now. I am. I kid a lot about that stuff about, actors and, doing whatever to get into the next level. I think it does exist. I'm not saying I think it exists. It does. It's with any business. Kiss enough ass, you'll move forward. You do the right things, you'll move on. You'll get better in the company. You meet new people, that sort of thing. Rubbing the right elbows. I've said that in my show many times. That's not a surprise. And I think most people would understand that. It makes sense. But the one thing I do want to point out, that I think is a big part of Gene Hackman, was that rejection part of it. Early in his life and career as an actor, hearing that you're not good enough, the chances of you making it are so slim that why even bother? Good luck. That's what he was told. Honestly. And he says that although it hurt at the time, and it would for anybody that's human, it made him angry to the point where he wanted to prove everybody wrong. Fuck you. And I'm sure that's what he did when he started getting work, landing roles. He's like, those sons of bitches. Look what I'm doing. Fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about. It's all opinion anyway, folks. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. It's true. Your taste in art is different, right, than other people's. And, okay, so he wasn't the best looking guy. But neither was Dustin Hoffman. Goes to show you that back then especially, talent overruled eventually. And if you tried hard enough and stayed on course in your goals, that the percentages go up, okay, when you're driven, when you go to the right party, make the right audition, keep the right attitude. It all pays off if you really want to do it and you think that it's possible. Don't give up. Keep at it. And who knows? Maybe you'd be the lucky one to get successful, consistent work. So I have to note that back in the day, Gene moving from here to there, back and forth between New York City and California, he eventually moves back to New York City. And it's famously known that the three actors, Gene Hackman, Dustin Hoffman, and Robert Duvall, knew each other very well before they became famous. And I find that it could be that Gene, Dustin, and Robert knew each other. Then they did. But how close were they? And how many actors did they know in total? I'm sure that Gene knew a lot of actors early in his career, in studying and working odd jobs. Dustin Hoffman, how many people did Dustin Hoffman know back in the day? I'm sure a lot of people, and same with Duvall. The fact that they sort of lived together, okay? I found that Gene and Dustin did share an apartment. It was Gene's apartment, and Dustin would sort of crash out there and wore out his welcome at one point, where Gene had to kick his ass out. And then there was Duvall and Hoffman lived together. It sounded to me that Dustin Hoffman sort of jumped around a lot with his residence throughout New York City. And also very determined young man as an actor. Haven't dived into Dustin Hoffman. He scares me a little bit because there's a lot to get into with Hoffman. And that would be sort of a 2-3-parter, a lot to dive into. I don't know if I have the strength right now. Just getting my feet back under me with Gene Hackman. I haven't done the show in a while. But Dustin Hoffman, intense. And I could see all that nervous energy within Hoffman going from here to there and auditions and odd jobs and whatnot. Duvall, also, very determined young man back then. And the fact that they all knew each other before they were famous and then all three of them become legendary? Are you kidding me? These things. And then I think to myself, okay, right. And one of them is going to be big as possible and knowing people. See? Who made it big first? Was it Hoffman? I think it was. Knowing Dustin helped. All the other people that Dustin knew. Makes sense. Knowing people, knowing the right people, gets you in the door, certain doors of auditions or just word of mouth. And it happened to Gene too. So let's talk about that. It took a while for Gene to sort of get into major roles, both in theater and on film. Years. I think it was another Gene Wilder, same thing. It took Gene Wilder a while to get a role, not giving up. Same for Gene Hackman. It took Gene a long time to get a role, any role. It must be frustrating. I couldn't, that's why I got out. I would go months without anything and I would get the rejection. Oh my God, it wears on you. You're this small little fish in this big pond of actors, and they're everywhere. Everywhere. I went to this audition one time, early in my career, where you go up the stairs, and it's on the highest floor, and it's just like a dance studio, and there's just hundreds of actors. And I saw this guy that I did a play with in Rocky River when I was a teenager, some musical I did. I saw this kid. I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. You got to be kidding me. For some reason, I thought I was the only actor from Northeast Ohio in New York City. But seeing that guy that day, guy I did a play with, a musical, in Rocky River in 1995, at this audition in New York City. I don't know, it just blew me away. Like, how, really are things that small that I ran into this guy in New York City? I mean, I'm going to put it to you plainly, I didn't feel very special at that point. Another thing that kind of turns you off is that you don't feel very special, especially early in your career as an actor. You feel pretty lost, pretty small. And it's the rare ones like Gene Hackman, okay, that don't get discouraged by that stuff. They're like, well, okay, fine. Let's nail that audition. All that other stuff, I'm not going to care. I'm going to push it aside. There's only one thing that matters, and that's getting the role. I babbled there. It happens. But, I mean, I was talking about Gene. How frustrated he was not getting a role. He had to have been. And him staying with it, not giving up. He could have very easily went, fuck it. They said it wasn't going to be any good. Obviously, I'm not getting anything. I'm just going to go back to Illinois, go to California, become an accountant, become a real estate agent, whatever, and be done with it. Move on with my life. Why waste any more time? He didn't do that. Although he probably thought it. He didn't. He stuck with it and finally got some work. And in doing so, got a movie role called Lilith, I believe. Had a very small role in this film. It was a film with Warren Beatty. Warren Beatty, folks, is a very important name in the career and success of Gene Hackman. Because if it wasn't for Warren Beatty, we may not know who Gene Hackman was. Mr. Beatty had one scene with Hackman and was so impressed by him that when Warren did Bonnie and Clyde years later, he suggested Hackman to the director. Ding, 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 ring-a-ding-ding. There is your connection in the business, sticking with it and making friends. Friends with Warren Beatty, a big player in Hollywood. It was Gene's wonderful work in a very small scene in a movie with Warren Beatty that got him into Bonnie and Clyde. And the rest was up to Gene to stay in the room. He got in the room. That was his big moment. Going from hopeful, promising, bright-eyed actor and sort of, hey, you're like outside the room and some big-time, actor opens the door a little bit, goes, Gene. And Gene, what? Gene, psst, you want to come inside? And Gene's, me? Okay. Brave enough to walk into that room. I'm sure most actors, don't even see the door. But Gene walked through it and stayed there because he's very good. He's very great. Gene Hackman's work. He did theater and, of course, film. He loved the theater. Life of it. The director aspect and the difference between theater and film from a director's perspective, where you did all your work with the director on stage with rehearsal, and then when the curtain went up, the director had to sit back and watch and hope and pray that he did a good job. And how different that was. And all the life that's formed on stage between the actors. This living, breathing organism of theater. So let's talk about, or mention, his film career. I'm not going to talk about all of them, just a few, and find out how he worked, mention some things that he did as an actor, and so on. The French Connection, 1971, his first big movie. He nails it. Wasn't the first choice to be Popeye. Great name, Popeye. He was the 6th or 7th choice, he says. He wasn't the hot ticket at the time, but though he was the right ticket. Like I said before, the great ones take their roles very seriously. Gene was no different. Costume was important, getting to know who Popeye was. He would go on, would you say, rides with real cops, watch what they did, and even participate in certain aspects of the job. Really getting his hands dirty. We're talking real method acting stuff. Gene would frequent the actor studio in New York City. All the great actors went through there, most of them anyway. The actor studio, I don't mention the actor studio enough. It was a great place to learn and grow, try new things, and Gene enjoyed being a part of the actor studio. I don't know if he knew Lee Strasberg, but he appreciated just the way the studio allowed you to try new things, different things. And as an actor, that's vital. You have to do that. The French Connection taught Gene in the process of becoming a big actor at the time that you had to be aware of everyone on set, respect them, also respect yourself. Don't give in to what you think may be mediocre work. Gene knew that to be successful, you had to be on your game. You had to feel good about people around you and the project itself. And if Gene felt there was a weak link anywhere in a production, he was bothered. He hated authority. He respected a director, but never really trusted them. He trusted himself. That was it. And because of this, he could be difficult. And from what my research tells me, Gene Hackman was difficult in most of the projects he was in. I don't like hearing that. I just don't. I was turned off by that. But, gotta respect it. These projects he did meant a lot to him. And if he felt, this is going to fail, he was ruined, crushed, threatening to leave projects because he didn't want to be part of a sinking ship. Gene is very complex because ultimately, in real life, behind scenes and offset, he was quiet, private, didn't reveal a lot, kept to himself. When you think back, those of us who are old enough to remember Gene during his heyday, when he was doing some amazing things, you didn't really hear about him in tabloids, gossip magazines, and things like that. You just didn't. He was low profile. But on set, that was a completely different story. He was the one you had to sort of worry about. He was all over the place because he was so unsure of himself and the project. Being difficult. But it meant something to him. And in the French Connection, he did so well. He won an Academy Award. The first one, he will win. He will win another as well. But it was his next interesting project called Scarecrow. And I want to get the year on this. Scarecrow was done in 1973, 2 years after French Connection. Gene says this was a very important film for him. And a lot of people don't know. What, Scarecrow? What? What, did he stand in a cornfield and for hours and they filmed him? Crows sitting on his head, pecking away at his pecker? Pecking away at his pecker. That one just came out, folks. What a great film premise that is. Being a scarecrow. No, it's a metaphor, of course. And he acted with Al Pacino. They were hobos. I love the movie. I studied this film in acting school. I just came upon it. It's an artsy film. Gene loved it. Working with Pacino, he loved that too. They didn't get along on set. They didn't get along off set. Pacino and Hackman, they really didn't get along. But they respected each other. Gene respected Scarecrow because it was something important to him in some way inside him as a person and an actor. It touched him in a way that even he, and when asked about it, he's like, it just worked. He says he has a little critic / little actor on his shoulder when he's doing a project that whispers in his ear all the time, saying all the good and bad things in a project. He says mostly bad, sometimes good. That little critic on his shoulder was boasting about Scarecrow a lot while doing it. And Gene was so devastated when Scarecrow bombed with the critics and at the box office. Nobody cared for the most part and turned him off on artsy projects. Both Gene and Al dressed as hobos and hitchhiked across the highways. It was a different time. I would never hitchhike. No way. Even if you paid me $1,000, someone comes up to me and says, Jeff, I'll give you $1,000 if you start hitchhiking right now in Cleveland and get to California, all through it hitchhiking. I say, no, thanks. 10,000? Maybe. It sounds dangerous, even for a 48-year-old man like myself. I wouldn't do it. But that's what they did back in 1973. Hitchhiking the highways, God bless you. These people that get into their characters. These method actors. Holy shit. You can only imagine what they're doing. Gene was part of that game. You had to do these things to get into the character, to do it right, to get into the mindset. Okay, I'm playing a hobo, so I got to be a hobo. I got to see what that's like. Robert De Niro did the same thing with Taxi Driver. Drove cabs in New York City to get into the character of Travis Bickle. That's what Gene Hackman did in Scarecrow. The next film is The Conversation. It's a Coppola film. Year, 1974. So the next year he's doing The Conversation. Overall, the movie is pretty bland. I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I like it though. Sometimes I like bland movies. Sometimes I like to sit back and watch I like Coppola anyway. Maybe it's just Coppola. Although I watched The Rain People. It's okay. It's not one of my favorites. That's another Coppola one. Of course, I'm not going to love every single thing Coppola does. But overall, I enjoy Coppola. And I enjoyed The Conversation. Gene's character. Laid back. Sort of like Gene in real life. And I think that's why I like it. He's subdued, likable. We'll get into that right now. The likability factor of an actor is big with me. Huge. It's so amazing to me. That idea, this likability factor that an actor has. He might be a pain in the ass on set, but I don't see it when I watch him on my TV. He's likable no matter what character he plays. And he played a lot of unlikable people on his projects. A bad guy. But I still like him. What is that? You know what that tells me? They're good. Period. They got that, like I said in the beginning of this episode. He had it. That thing you can't teach, and you could go to 1 billion classes, take 1,000 workshops, watch seminars until your head falls off. You'll never attain. There are some people that will never attain that special something inside that makes you like them. Gene had it. He showed in his work. He was likable. I liked watching him. I rooted for him, even if he was a bad guy. Doesn't happen often. There are many actors I watch today that just, they make, what is that? Like inside me, I get like angry. Like what? I get it. I got some anger thing going on inside me. There are certain, and I think to myself, is it the character they're playing? They're just unlikable. Okay. That's why I don't like them. And I walk away going, that's it. Okay, I'm not feeling good about myself and what I just said. What I saw and felt. Okay. But then it bothers me and it sticks in me. Like, why is it that I just don't like that actor, no matter where they are? Good, bad, yeah, I just want to, what is that? It's because they don't have that special something. That's what I'm getting at, folks. I haven't done this show in a while, so I got a lot of pent-up stuff I got to get out. Therapy. It's therapy. So getting back to the conversation. Gene learned to play the saxophone for the role. Love that. It's hard to learn an instrument. And the dedication of a person to learn something like that shows how dedicated he was. Gene's brother, Richard, played 2 roles in the film. So they were close. Gene never really talked about Richard that much, but Richard obviously had an interest in the success of his brother. And Richard would be a stand-in for Gene. Ha! Makes sense. And that's great. Although, I guess Gene being difficult on set, being difficult with everyone, there was no exception there. He was also difficult with his brother, yelling at him and so on. Tyrant, right? And I think it was only because of the work, because you got Gene outside the work. He was fine. He was a nice guy. You can have a conversation with him. Go out and have a beer with Gene Hackman. It wasn't a big deal. He wasn't an asshole off set. It was just on set. I find it so interesting to me. Why is that? You know why? I see it this way. I think an asshole's an asshole. So, like, if I found out Gene was an asshole on set, I'd be like, oh, that must mean he's an asshole off set. Not the case. Very complex character. Asshole on set, for the most part, not off set. The next big project we're going to talk about is a film that a lot of people are going to know and respect and love. Hoosiers, 1986. Gene went into this project hopeful, positive. Him and the director got together, looked over the script, laughed, cried, got emotional, gung-ho about it. The director says, as soon as Gene Hackman got on set, he didn't know who he was. Who is this guy? He was negative and wanted off the project within the first day. Right off the bat, Gene Hackman had that little critic on his shoulder telling him, what the fuck are you doing here? This is going to suck. And it never left him. Gene hated working on Hoosiers. It took Dennis Hopper 3 weeks into the project to settle Gene down. Say, Gene, it's okay, man. We're going to get through this. Just hang in there. Gene was like, this is going to be a flop. What are we doing here? Like, what? Like, who gives a shit about this Indiana basketball team and the small town, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that was it. I don't think it was the premise. It might have been the actors, the location, maybe. But there was something about that project. Whatever it was. But Gene felt, this is going to suck. and was just unpleasant during the whole production. I want to give a few notes about this. People said he'd come on set every day and just be in a foul mood. He was nicknamed the Black Cloud. Whoa. And when film shooting wrapped, Gene insisted that he view a rough cut of the film before he dubbed any audio. The director and the producer were nervous, thinking if he is on par with how he's acted through this whole process, watches this rough cut and is even more pissed off, he's not going to do the extra audio to finish the film. They were afraid that Gene would just walk away and never see them again. So Gene viewed the rough cut, walked up to the producer and the director, looked them straight in the eyes, and said, "How the hell did you do that?" Gene realized it wasn't a flop at that moment. He was wrong, and he admitted it. Before we move on, I want to go ahead and give a quote by the director of Hoosiers. His name is David Onspa. He says, quote, "Gene had me on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He also says this, quote, he gave me my first anxiety attack. One morning I woke up and I couldn't walk. The room was spinning. I thought every day in the film was going to be my last because Gene's agent was trying to get me fired." Oh man, that's the end of the quote. Damn. According to Onspa, the only thing that saved his job was the dailies. The producers looked at the dailies and says, "David, you're not getting fired." End of quote. But that interesting tidbit. And it goes to show you that even if you feel a project isn't going well, and I've heard this many times, that an actor would do a scene and they yell cut. And you go, God, man, that was horrible. Everything was off. There was no connection. They're going to throw that away. And you watch that scene in the dailies, which means they replay it and you sit down in a chair and you watch it on the screen. Going from how you felt to the screen and how it really plays out and how the editing's done, things like that, camera angles. It looks okay. They pull it off. It looks fine. I find that so interesting and things like that I'm fascinated with because I never experienced that. Doing a film and then going through the motions and then watching yourself. So let's bring that up now. Gene Hackman didn't watch himself. There are very few movies that he saw of himself. He hated watching himself. Even the dailies. He says, "I never watched a daily in my life." And when he watched Hoosiers, that was a rare occasion. He just didn't do that, but was so concerned about his performance in Hoosiers, he had to see it for himself. And walked away going, I guess I didn't do that bad of a job. 1988 brought us Mississippi Burning, Gene Hackman, William Dafoe, Deep South, racial tensions. One of Gene's best performances. That's my opinion. Not only do I like the movie, well done. Big fan of William Dafoe. Gene Hackman's performance, nearly perfect. He hated playing that type of character, and I get it. I would too. He pulled it off. Of course, we have to mention Unforgiven, 1992, a Clint Eastwood production. This will earn Gene Hackman his second Academy Award. He was skittish about the project, didn't want to do it. Clint had to convince him to do this. I think Gene was tired of doing action/violent films. And he kicked a lot of people around in this film. Just kicking people in the stomach, kicking people in the face. Little Bill. Tremendous performance. Good film, great film. And also The Firm with Tom Cruise. I will put this movie in every other year. It's a long one. I like Cruise, and Hackman and Cruise have great chemistry. But before we move on, I have to mention that Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman working together. There was friction, I heard, but I think Clint understood the way Gene worked. Gene had a certain way of doing things, even working with Clint Eastwood. He had a process, and Clint mentioned how difficult Gene would be, and I think that Clint, being both an actor and a director, he got it. He gets it. He gets the process, and not every actor has the same process. Being a director has got to be so hard because you're dealing with all these different sort of actors and people on the set, and keeping everybody in line has to be a tremendously hard job. I give props to any director. It's got to be one of the hardest jobs in Hollywood. It has to be. Dealing with all different sorts of personalities. Catering to certain people like Gene. Clint understood it and wasn't really bothered by it. Plus, Clint Eastwood really, does anything bother Clint? Nothing. He will live to be 195. Another notable performance is The Birdcage. You got Robin Williams, Nathan Lane, Hank Azaria just acting all over the place. Pretty much what they're doing. And then you have Gene Hackman, sort of almost forgotten in that film. You think Gene Hackman's in The Birdcage? When? He's there. He plays a congressman. Nails it. Almost sort of under the radar performance for Hackman, but so good. That natural ability factor plays into a role like that. He's just sort of being there with Diane Weiss, doing the thing and making it real and being that part of the film you get. And he's funny in it too. Next one, Royal Tenenbaums, 2001. Wes Anderson film. Different. Gene Hackman went into it hesitantly. And on set was a problem. Yelling at Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson's like, what the didn't know about this. Bill Murray even had to step in from time to time to calm Gene down and stick up for his friend, Mr. Anderson. Which I find interesting because Bill Murray is known to be a pain in the ass on set. Not getting his way sort of thing. And he had to step in to calm Gene down. Bill Murray had to do that. Goes to show you how difficult Mr. Hackman was on the Royal Tenenbaums, just like he was on Hoosiers. I think it was the same thing here. But he pulls off a believable performance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a big fan of Wes Anderson. I think he's too weird. He's a different kind of filmmaker, just like Burton, just like David Lynch, rest in peace. I mean, David Lynch was a creepy, brilliant director. And then you had, Burton, who's also creepy but fun, right? Funny director. Interesting. Then you have Wes Anderson, a more intellectual sort of comedic director. Really just, I don't know. Maybe I should watch more of Wes Anderson to appreciate his work. But I find it just too odd. I like Hackman. I like Bill Murray. And a lot of the cast in the Royal Tenenbaums. But he didn't feel it. Wes Anderson giving interviews about Gene Hackman, you could tell Wes Anderson was afraid of Gene Hackman. What a presence he must have been on set, right? You're supposed to be afraid of the director. Sometimes actors are just bigger characters and impressionable, this force of nature on set. That was Gene. He possessed that. One of the projects Gene liked was Runaway Jury, year 2003, which I find curious. I didn't like that movie. It was a little corny. The writing was not that good. Performances subpar at best. But Gene seemed to feel good on that set. There was something he felt good about on set with that one. But overall, I didn't like it. So to me, it seems that the ones that he didn't feel good about were his better projects. What the fuck is that? What is that? The strife. The challenges. Gene Hackman loved the challenge. Although it may not have seemed that way on set, driving everybody crazy, being a tyrant. Maybe it was because there were some very special people in that room that challenged him. Think about it. That might be the case. Because it makes sense to me. That the ones that he was frustrated with the most were the ones that did well for me artistically and seemed to do well for him during the Academy Award process. Guy had 2 Academy Awards, 2 Golden Globes, run British Awards. Guy was great. And I didn't mention Superman because I just felt that, people wouldn't want to talk about Superman with Christopher Reeve and a little cameo by Brando. They didn't act together, but he respected Brando, loved him, said that when he was studying in New York City at the time in the 50s, a lot of actors tried to imitate Brando, go slow on set, on the stage, like that was a practice and felt that was silly. But he respected Brando, did Superman. He said that he loved Christopher Reeve working with him. I think it was a positive experience, Superman. And I love Lex Luthor. He had fun with that character. Notice that. Notice him as Lex Luthor, how underrated that is. He had fun with Lex Luthor. He played. That's what acting is. I think he enjoyed Lex Luthor. Okay, so before we wrap it up, we're going to mention a few tidbits about Gene Hackman himself, things that it didn't come up during his early life in his films. Here we go. He officially retired at the age of 78 in April of 2008. Was the first choice to play Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. When asked about friendship in an interview, Robert Duvall replied, quote, "A friend is someone who, many years ago, offered you his last $300 when you broke your pelvis. That's a friend, and his name is Gene Hackman." End of quote. He was a good friend. As a young man, Hackman attended a showing of a movie called A Streetcar Named Desire in 1951 and was impressed by the performance of Marlon Brando. He said he was so natural, and the fact that he didn't look like a movie star that typically looked that way in the 50s. After exiting the theater, he looked at his dad and said, "I want to be an actor." Kevin Costner has said that the best actor he ever worked with was Gene. While a struggling actor in New York City, he worked as a soda jerk in a pharmacy and as a furniture mover. He told Time magazine in 2011 that the worst job I ever had was working nights at the legendary Chrysler Building as part of a crew that polished the leather furniture. His other passions are cars and painting. He loves to paint. And when he was in New York City, he studied painting. And ever since then, he painted every day. These artists, it never stops. They have to do something every day. And through painting, he fulfilled that something inside of him every day that had to do something art-related. He felt that his art as a painter wasn't that great. But he did it anyway. And it felt good to him to put something on paper. Gene Hackman, you did it, man. You did great work. Though you could be difficult, it was for a reason. I think most people got that when they stepped back and took a look at the project and saw the difficulties or the insecurities you had about your character and just the film as a whole. But it was important to you. You didn't brush anything off. And it showed in your work. I loved your work. And I think back to all those performances that you had in the 80s and 70s. Watch Scarecrow. That would be my recommendation for anyone wanting to see something different from Gene Hackman you've never seen before. Watch Scarecrow with Al Pacino. Not the best film. Artsy. But different. I think you'd like it. Gene Hackman's death at the age of 95 at first seemed really weird, suspicious, didn't it? My wife told me about it as I woke up that morning when it came out. She said, Gene Hackman died. So, oh man. I knew he was in his 90s. She said he was 95. I said, that makes sense. Wow, wow. But Amy looked at me. She goes, something's really weird about this announcement, though. Like, announcement about what? What do you mean? Well, announcing his death, they said that not only did they find Gene, but they found his wife and a dog dead in the house. I'm like, oh, no. I said, that's probably just, they worded it wrong. Something was really fishy about that. I said, that doesn't make sense. The odds of that? Come on. Something more had to happen if that makes sense. So later on that day, when I was reading about it, that's what they said. I'm like, what are the chances that Gene, his wife, and a dog all die at the same time? Something really strange happened that day. So it was discovered that his wife got some sort of virus, some rare virus from rat droppings, something found in rats. 2 or 3 people die from this a year. That's how rare it is. What was going on over there? It seemed to me that Gene and his wife were very secluded out in Mexico. He had this mansion out in Mexico. And as private as they were, they sort of took care of each other. Gene's kids really did sort of separate themselves, so they were just private too. They understood Gene's privacy, left him alone in his 90s, felt that his wife, who was in her 60s, could take care of Gene, didn't need any help, but she got sick. From what I understand, she felt she just had the flu, could beat this thing. I think it just got out of hand, and she ended up passing from this virus, rare virus. And when she passed, Gene was alone. And at the age of 95, he relied on his wife to take care of him. And she wasn't there to take care of him. He perished in a horrible way. I don't even want to think about how he died, confused, hungry, thirsty. And he just probably either died of that, no food, at the age of 95. I'm sure he needed regular care. Or maybe his heart finally gave out. He had a bad heart and died at the age of 95. And he will surely be missed. It's amazing to me the respect that Gene Hackman had in the acting community, in the entertainment field, the overwhelming adoration for Gene Hackman was truly impressive, wasn't it? I'm not on social media a lot, but I do have Facebook. I have Instagram. I'll check Twitter here and there. But all the people that I've known in the past through acting and people I follow, I mean, gushing over Gene Hackman. Haven't seen that since maybe James Caan passing away. And Maggie Smith passed away recently. She also was very adored. And Gene touched many lives, touched the community, because he was that good. And he lasted for so long and gave such great work. So thank you, Mr. Hackman, for giving us those moments. Did some great stuff. And it was great talking about it with you in the Actors Room, episode 140. Thank you for listening to me ramble on this day. Just some personal stuff going on with me I'll throw out there if you're still listening. I had some jobs, things going on that didn't work out. I tried something new. It was horrible. I got out. It just wasn't for me. The people I worked with were phenomenal. Just great people. It just was the job, you know? And I tried something different. It didn't work out for me. Okay, I'm going to say I worked in hospitals, and I fear hospitals. I'm thinking about it right now. My hands are getting clammy. I'm just not good with hospitals. Sick people, sick kids mostly. And I tried to just not see it, brush it away, ignore it, for the job. I felt I'll get used to it. I have to. I just couldn't. I couldn't break through it. So my artistic soul just was damaged, and I didn't even really want to watch film. Definitely didn't want to do my podcast. Obviously, I haven't done anything. I did one show last year, I think, and this is my first one this year in March. So artistically, I was just devastated. And not that it was solely the job, but it had a big part of it. So I'm not doing that anymore. I'm doing something else, and I'm back to what I was doing before I left this job, and I just feel better already. It's only been a couple of weeks, but I'm getting back into the flow. I want to watch more films. I would love to do a David Lynch episode. That guy had so much inside, different art form in his mind about doing film, and Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, Eraserhead. These are just really creepy, weird films, but I like them. Artful shit. And in the actor's room, I want to get back to that. But as I leave you, thank you. For those who probably stuck with me, I'm sure my audience right now is 25 people. Hello there. Thank you. Let's make it 30 next week. Hope everybody's doing good. I'm doing good, doing better. Glad to be back, putting out an episode. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. The voice, as you can tell, is getting there. Gonna have to rest it now. Have some tea. I enjoy tea. Hope you do too. Yeah. I do hope everybody's doing good. And watch that film. Watch Scarecrow. French Connection. The Conversation. It's a Coppola film. You'll like it. It's good stuff. It's good story. Great characters. And getting into a Gene Hackman kick. He passed this year at the age of 95. Pay tribute. Watch a couple of his movies. Give respect. When he did a film, right, and you're watching it, think to yourself, there's a lot that went into that film, behind the scenes with him. Even if it looks like he's doing a tremendous job, which he is, right when they yell cut, he's a mess. He runs to his trailer and screams. What am I doing here? This movie's gonna bomb. But it doesn't. Most of the time it didn't. So give respect. Watch a Gene Hackman film. Enjoy it. Respect it. Amen. Just watch something. Enjoy it. At the end of the day. Or in the middle of the day. I'm a nighttime watcher. I watch at night. As I unwind, my mind, my soul, everything about my body relaxes. I can enjoy a film. I can't do it during the day. It's just there's things going on. I got to get things done. At night, I watch it. I enjoy it. I hope you do the same. Thank you for listening. Enjoy art. Enjoy it. It's a diversion. We need it. Thank you. God bless you. Have a good one.